Where the hell do you think you're going? My truck rolled to a dead stop as three black SUVs blocked my driveway like a border checkpoint. A man in a neon vest strutted forward, chin high, barked out, "This road's closed. Community inspection in progress. You're not authorized to enter." I gave him a slow, tired smile. "This is my property." Before he could answer, a cold, steady voice drifted from behind them. John's voice. "You boys got about 5 seconds before this turns into a real bad day." 10 hours earlier. It started as an ordinary morning, the kind you don't think twice about, the kind you later replay in your head and whisper, "If only I'd stayed home." The sun wasn't even all the way up yet when I stepped outside, boots sinking into the cool dirt of the driveway. A faint fog floated above the trees, and the lake behind the house looked like a sheet of hammered silver, peaceful, quiet, mine. I had a list of chores in the passenger seat: pick up a new hydraulic hose for the splitter, grab some decking screws from the hardware store, maybe swing by Murdoch's for dog food if I had time. Nothing special, just a standard 10-hour run into town and back. Before leaving, I stood on the porch for a moment, sipping the last of my coffee. If there's one thing you learn from living on private land, it's this: silence means everything is where it should be, and that morning, the silence was perfect. No trucks, no tourists, no HOA golf carts humming like mosquitoes on wheels. Everything felt normal. I didn't know that up the ridge, behind those expensive stone-faced houses, a group of people in ironed polo shirts were holding what they called an emergency coordination meeting. I didn't know they had a plan with my name written on it. I didn't know they were waiting for the exact moment I pulled out of the driveway. All I knew was that I had places to be. As I walked to the truck, my phone buzzed. A text. John. "Hey, brother. You home later? Swinging by to drop off that water gauge?" Damn. I had told him to come by this week. I'd forgotten the exact day. I texted back, "Running into town, be back around sunset. You can still swing by if you want." I didn't think another second about it. John wasn't the type who needed an appointment. If he showed up early, he'd just wait on the porch or leave the gauge by the door. And honestly, knowing he might be around made the place feel even safer. Turns out, it might have been the only thing that saved my entire property from being taken apart like a crime scene. As I pulled down the dirt road, kicking up a small cloud of dust behind me, the world looked so normal it was almost funny. No signs of trouble, no footprints, no strange cars, nothing. But 10 hours is a long time. Long enough for people with too much power and not enough sense to decide they could turn my land into their personal project. Long enough for a group of HOA leaders to convince themselves they had authority they didn't have. Long enough for them to set up something that looked an awful lot like a roadside ambush. And long enough for John to roll into the driveway, see the mess they were creating, and realize exactly what kind of fight they were trying to start. Of course, I didn't know any of this yet. I just shifted the truck into drive, rolled toward the main road, and told myself it'd be a good, easy day. Funny thing about peace, you never notice the last moment you had it until it's gone. I didn't find out about the HOA meeting until much later, but when I finally saw the footage John captured, well, it painted the picture clear as day. While I was driving out of town for my 10-hour errand run, the leadership team of Lakeview Grace was gathering around a long folding table in Karen Duvall's garage. You could tell they thought it was a real command center. Clipboards everywhere, a box fan buzzing in the corner, coffee pots, maps of the lake pinned up with thumbtacks like they were planning a military operation. Except there wasn't a single military bone among them. Karen opened the meeting like she always did, chin raised, voice rehearsed, acting like she was leading FEMA through a hurricane. "We have a problem," she said, tapping her pen on the table. "It's the owner of the shoreline parcel. He refuses cooperation." Cooperation. Karen used that word a lot, every time she meant control. A short man with a receding hairline muttered, "The board agrees. His land is strategically positioned. It's the closest access point for most of our homeowners. We need to establish community pathways." Another lady chimed in, "We've tried being nice. He keeps putting up signs." "He's making it personal," Karen snapped. "He's blocking shared lake access." One of the committee men looked confused and whispered, "But it's not shared, that's private property." Karen turned her stare on him so sharply, he didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. See, this wasn't about rights, or fairness, or lake access. It was about pride, ego. Karen didn't like the idea that someone, anyone, could say no to her. And when someone like that feels disrespected, they don't talk it out, they escalate. We need to show him, Karen said, leaning forward, that the community has authority. Someone asked the obvious question, what authority is that? Karen didn't miss a beat. The authority we choose to act with. It would have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. That's when she rolled out her plan. A poster board with bullet points. Images printed from Google Maps, notes scribbled with red marker. All of it designed to look official. As if the HOA had some kind of jurisdiction over land they didn't own, didn't pay taxes on, and couldn't legally step foot on. Karen tapped the map with the back of her pen. We'll conduct a community safety assessment, she announced. The room nodded like that meant something. We'll document violations, she added, more nodding, and we'll film every interaction. A middle-aged guy with a beer belly perked up. So, if he argues, we can show he's hostile? Exactly, Karen said, smiling with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight, but only because she always chose opponents who couldn't fight back. Another woman, the HOA secretary, raised her hand. What if he calls the sheriff? Karen waved the question off like a fly. Sheriff can't enforce private disputes, and besides, he's usually too busy. As long as we keep it civil, no one's getting arrested. She was wrong on both counts, spectacularly wrong, then she unveiled the final piece. We set up a checkpoint on his driveway. A gasp went around the room. Not because it was illegal, but because it was bold. Karen smiled wider. We show the community we're serious. We show him his behavior affects everyone. And if he refuses to cooperate, she paused for effect. We escalate. The word hung in the air like smoke. One of the men worried aloud. Shouldn't we wait until he's home? No, Karen shook her head. We do it while he's gone. It's safer that way. Safer for who, she didn't specify. Probably herself. They didn't know John would arrive minutes later. They didn't know he'd watch them fumble around my property like wannabe inspectors. They didn't know he'd record everything they touched, everything they dug, everything they tried to install. And they sure didn't know he was force recon. Karen wrapped up the meeting with a line that, in hindsight, might be the funniest moment of the whole mess. Remember, this is a peaceful demonstration of community authority. Stay professional, stay calm. 10 hours later, 2 of her people would be face down on my gravel, handcuffed, while Karen screamed into a phone. Professional, calm, right. But for now, back in that garage, with her maps and her markers and her fantasy of control, she believed every word. They thought they were running the show. They thought they were about to teach me a lesson. They had no idea the lesson was coming for them instead. John never rushes. He's the kind of man who steps out of his truck, looks around once, and already knows what's wrong before he says a word. That's why, the moment he pulled up to my driveway, he stopped mid-step. The dirt wasn't right. It wasn't anything big. Just the kind of thing only an outdoors man or a Marine would notice. The ground was disturbed in a way it shouldn't be. Fresh tire imprints, wide ones, too heavy for a ranch truck, too straight for a neighbor's ATV. And then the footprints, lots of them, grouped, scattered, overlapping. A whole cluster of people had walked it through the entrance of my land that morning. John crouched, brushing his fingers over the soil, checking the depth of the impressions. Some steps were fresh, some older, some pointed toward the house, and some pointed back out, like there had been 2 separate visits. He didn't panic, he didn't swear, he didn't grab his phone and call anyone. He just stood up slowly and looked toward the tree line, eyes narrowing. Something moved earlier that morning. Something organized. He walked a little farther down the drive, staying silent, one hand resting lightly near the phone clipped to his belt. Then he saw it. Something small that didn't belong. A thin survey stake, bright white plastic, jammed awkwardly near the ditch line. A stake I never put there. A stake that wasn't old. Still clean, still sharp, still smelling faintly of new hardware store plastic. John checked the ground around it. Boot prints, shallow, hurried. He followed the trail farther and found a spot of loose earth, like someone had tested a shovel there. Not a real hole, just a few exploratory stabs into my soil. Testing, measuring, preparing. John felt the back of his neck tighten. He glanced toward the lake, and from the far ridge, just for a moment, he saw the glint of sunlight off a windshield. A vehicle, black, parked just long enough to signal presence, not long enough to identify. Then it pulled away. John raised his phone and zoomed in, catching only the shape of an SUV disappearing around the bend. He murmured to himself, "Someone's been busy this morning." He moved slowly, circling around the front of the house, always careful to stay behind cover. He wasn't hiding out of fear. He was hiding to gather information. John tested the doorknob, untouched, windows undisturbed, no signs of a break-in. But the land had been stepped on by strangers who didn't belong. He checked his phone, no service, bad timing. Still, he typed a message to me anyway. "You heading back soon? Something's off here." The phone churned, then finally blinked. Message not delivered. John exhaled slowly. He walked back toward the tree line, found a shaded position with a full view of the driveway and the house, and settled in like a man preparing for a long wait. He didn't know exactly what the HOA was planning. He didn't know how many would come back. He didn't know when, but he knew something was coming. He could feel it in the ground, in the air, in the quiet. So he stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting, like a guard dog that decided to sit on the porch until his friend came home. John didn't have to wait long. It started with the sound, an engine rumbling far off in the trees. Then another. Then the unmistakable crunch of gravel under tires. John shifted slightly behind the cedar tree, raising his phone. A black SUV rolled into view, then a second one, then a third. No markings, no utility logos. Just shiny paint, bright daylight, and a whole lot of entitlement. The doors opened almost in unison. 6 people stepped out wearing matching neon vests labeled Lakeview Grace, Community Safety Team. John whispered, "Oh, this is gonna be stupid." The group split up, moving with the clumsy coordination of people trying to look official without actually knowing what they were doing. 2 carried clipboards. One had a tape measure he kept pulling out, but never using. One guy lugged a tote bag full of plastic stakes. And 2 men headed straight toward my electrical pole. John zoomed in. The first man opened the tote bag and pulled out a small gray box. Cheap, unbranded, something bought off Amazon for $20. He held it up proudly. "There," he said. "Put it here. Make it visible." The second man nodded and began screwing the fake box to the pole. John filmed every movement. He caught their voices perfectly. "Once this is up, we'll have proof he ignored a hazard notice." Karen said get photos from 3 angles. She wants it to look official. "Are the stakes ready for the walkway?" "Yeah, we'll say he blocked a historical path." John felt his jaw tighten. This wasn't trespassing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was fabrication. Intentional, premeditated setup. And they were doing it while I was gone, because they were too scared to do it while I was home. One of the clipboard men turned, scanning the area. His eyes locked on the shape in the trees. John didn't flinch. He waited until the man raised a hand. Sir? Can we help you?" John stepped partially out of the shadows, posture harmless, voice calm. "Just passing through," the man frowned. "This area is under a community inspection." "On a private driveway?" John asked lightly. The man hesitated. "Temporary enforcement authority." John smiled politely. "Good luck with that." He didn't challenge them, didn't confront, didn't scare them off, because scaring them off would end the evidence gathering. And evidence was exactly what I needed later. John turned and walked a few steps back, just enough to appear uninterested, and then quietly slid behind the next tree, hidden again. The HOA team didn't realize a Marine was watching. They didn't realize they were being documented. They didn't realize they were setting themselves up for felony-level trouble. They kept installing fake stakes, taking staged photos, recording rehearsed dialogue for later. At one point, the lead man said, "All right, we're good. We reconvene at 5. He should be driving back around then." John felt the knot in his gut twist. There it was, the plan, the ambush. They were building a confrontation on purpose, counting on catching me angry, counting on video they could twist, counting on making me look like the aggressor. John lifted his phone and whispered, "You boys have no idea what kind of day you just planned for yourselves." The group finally packed up. They climbed back into their SUVs. Engines roared, dust rose, and they disappeared up the ridge. John stayed behind, silent as the trees around him. He looked at the fake hazard box, the stakes, the disturbed ground, the driveway they planned to block. He checked his phone again, still no service. Then he whispered to himself, "Get home, brother. because this ain't no inspection. This is an ambush." And John stayed right there, hidden, watching the road like a sentry, until the moment I returned. John waited nearly 2 hours in the quiet shade of the cedar tree, the sun shifting slowly across the afternoon sky. Not impatient, not nervous, just watchful. He knew trouble wasn't finished. He could sense it in the way the land had gone still, like the woods were holding their breath. Then he heard it. Engines, multiple, coming fast. John straightened, phone raised, thumb hovering over the record button. The first SUV came around the bend like it owned the road, then another, then a third. They didn't creep in cautiously this time. They rolled in with the confidence of people who believed they had authority. The doors swung open immediately. The neon vests were back, this time with more gear. Traffic cones, caution tape, a folding barricade, a metal sign that read, "Community Safety Enforcement, checkpoint ahead." John whispered, almost amused, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." One of the women snapped her fingers at the group. "Okay, team, he should be here soon." Set it up exactly like Karen said. Exactly like Karen said. That phrase alone made John grind his teeth. The men dragged the barricade across the driveway, blocking the entire entrance. Not partially, not symbolically, fully. They positioned the cones in a perfect little row, then added caution tape on top, giving the whole thing the visual authority of a roadblock from a low-budget TV show. John zoomed in with his camera. Every angle, every movement, faces, license plates, conversations. A man with a gut hanging over his belt slapped a clipboard against his palm and barked, "Remember, when he pulls up, keep your phones recording. We need proof of hostile escalation." John swore under his breath. They weren't just anticipating trouble, they were planning it. One of the younger guys raised a hand nervously. "But what if he doesn't get angry?" Clipboard guy scoffed. "Oh, he'll get angry. Karen said he's the type. Just keep pushing." "Push? How?" another man asked. Clipboard guy grinned. "Simple. Don't let him in. Block the road. Tell him there's a safety violation on his property and he can't enter until we finish the assessment." A woman chimed in. "Karen wants the footage of him refusing to cooperate. If he touches a cone or moves a barricade, that's aggression. Document it." John's jaw locked, his breath shifting from calm to cold, predatory, coordinated, scripted, and all of it on my land. The men continued setting up the checkpoint with ridiculous ceremony. One hammered a stake into the dirt. Another adjusted the angle of the sign like he was prepping for a parade. Two more paced around, practicing lines under their breath. "Sir, we need you to calm down." "Sir, this is for community safety." "Sir, don't raise your voice." John recorded all of it. Then came the part that made his stomach drop. Clipboard guy clapped his hands. "All right, last thing. Where's the kid?" A teenager stepped out of the SUV, holding a neck brace in one hand and a small sling in the other. John muttered, "What the hell?" The kid whined, "Do I really have to wear this? It's itchy." The woman scolded him. "Karen said it'll help reinforce the injury claim. Put it on." The teenager groaned, slipped the brace over his neck, and half-heartedly adjusted it. John zoomed in. His voice dropped to a whisper, "You've got to be out of your damn minds." They were staging an injured witness, preparing the scene, building a narrative, hoping to provoke a reaction, catch it on camera, and twist the story until the sheriff, or a judge, sided with them. John inhaled slowly, grounding himself. He needed to wait. Interfering now would jeopardize the evidence. And he knew me. He knew once I arrived I'd see through the act immediately. He just needed to be there when the moment came. The HOA team began rehearsing positions like actors before a play. "Okay, you two stand in front of the barricade. You three film from the side. Kid, sit on the cooler and look sad. No, sadder. Remember, stay firm. Don't move out of his way." One of the men, the nervous one, asked, "What if he just drives around the barricade?" Clipboard guy shook his head confidently. "He can't. We blocked the ditch with the ATV." John's eyes widened. He shifted slightly and zoomed in. There it was. A red ATV parked sideways across the narrow ditch that lined the drive. They had fully blocked the entrance. Not suggested, not symbolically limited. Absolutely blocked. John felt the temperature in his chest rise. Not anger, not panic. Focus. He checked the time, checked the angle of the sun. You'd be pulling down the gravel road any minute. He raised his phone again, pressed record, held his breath. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The trap was ready. And John whispered to himself, steady as a sniper settling into position. "All right, brother, come home. Let's end this circus." Then he stepped back deeper into the trees, close enough to intervene, far enough to stay unseen, ready for the moment the engine of your truck rolled into earshot. The sky had turned the color of warm copper by the time I turned off the highway and onto my gravel road. 10 hours in town had drained me dry, and all I wanted was my porch, my lake breeze, and a quiet evening frying up the leftovers I'd planned the night before. Ranger, the old shepherd mix in my back seat, lifted his head and gave a soft growl, not angry, not afraid, just alert. "Yeah," I muttered. "I feel it too." Then we rounded the last bend, and the world in front of me stopped making sense. 3 SUVs sat parked sideways across my own driveway, forming a barricade so tight it could have stopped a cattle stampede. Bright orange cones dotted the ground. Yellow caution tape stretched across the road. A metal sign leaned crookedly against a cooler. Community safety checkpoint. Do not proceed. My foot slid off the gas. What in the hell? 6 HOA members in neon vests milled around like they were guarding a crime scene. 3 already had their phones pointed at me. 2 stood in front of the barricade, arms crossed, chests puffed out, trying to look authoritative, and instead looking like men waiting for a bus that never comes. And then I spotted the cherry on this Sunday of stupidity. A teenager sitting on the cooler, wearing a neck brace that was at least 3 sizes too big. I recognized him instantly. Jason Duvall's buddy. The same kid who had been filming the night Jason tried to shove me. So, that was the plan. A setup. A staged injury. A fake checkpoint. A camera crew to capture my aggression. I eased the truck forward until my bumper sat inches from the first cone. Clipboard guy, the self-appointed commander, marched up and slapped his palm against my hood. "Stop! This area is restricted!" I lowered the window halfway. Not for him, for the record. "What is this supposed to be?" "Sir," he said loudly, too loudly, "you cannot enter your property until this safety assessment is complete." "My property," I repeated slowly. "You're blocking my property." "Sir, remain calm," he said, already glancing at the cameras. Behind him, someone whispered just loud enough to be picked up on video, "He's escalating." I hadn't moved an inch. Clipboard guy squared his shoulders. "We have detected a hazardous utility violation within your perimeter. Until we complete our inspection, the community is liable if you enter." I blinked. Liable for me walking into my own land. "That is correct," he said proudly. "Please pull your vehicle aside and wait for authorization." Authorization? On a driveway my grandfather carved out 50 years ago. "And what if I don't?" I asked. He smiled like he'd been waiting for that very line. "Sir, refusal to cooperate will be documented as—" A voice cut him off like a blade slicing rope. "Don't say another word to him." The HOA crew stiffened, not in confusion, in recognition. Clipboard guy's face twisted. "You again? I thought I told you to move along earlier." I didn't even have to look. I knew that voice. John stepped out from the shade of the tree with the slow, quiet confidence of a man who had survived worse than this on 3 continents. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't even angry, just steady, controlled, unshakably calm. He approached the side of my truck first, eyes flicking over me like he was running a medical check. "You good?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I'm getting there." John nodded once. Then he looked back at the HOA crew, and whatever thin confidence they'd built up during rehearsal evaporated like spit on hot asphalt. Clipboard guy tried to salvage his authority. "Sir, this is a restricted—" John cut him off with a look. "I moved along," he said quietly. "Then I moved back." Several of the neon-vested officers shifted nervously. One whispered, "That's the guy that was filming us earlier." "You're interfering with an active assessment," Clipboard guy barked, volume rising with panic. John didn't respond. He just stepped closer to the cones, hands relaxed, shoulders loose. The exact posture a Marine adopts right before someone makes the biggest mistake of their life. "This isn't an inspection," John said. "This is a blockade." He pointed at the barricade, the cones, the taped-off road. "And you built it on private land." The cameras rolled. The kid in the neck brace swallowed hard. The wind picked up the caution tape and fluttered it like a warning flag. And in that moment, I felt it. The air shifting, the tension coiling, the last breath before the storm. The confrontation wasn't coming. It was already here. John stepped forward until every man in those fake HOA patrol vests could feel the ground shift under their boots. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He just planted himself in the middle of the gravel road and said, quiet as a church pew, "Move your vehicles. You've got 5 seconds." They froze. You could hear a wind gust roll through the pine line. 5. One of the younger HOA men swallowed hard. 4. A second man hissed, "Just hold your ground. Don't back up." 3. That did it. Panic snapped through them like a dry branch under a boot. "Back it up! Back it up!" Doors slammed. Reverse lights blinked. SUV tires spit gravel in every direction. Within seconds, they had jerked their vehicles back just far enough to leave a narrow lane. John didn't smile, didn't even blink. He simply stepped aside and told me, "Road's open." I eased the truck forward. 5 feet, 10. You could feel the resentment radiating off the HOA men as they lined the sides of the road, arms crossed, jaws tight, looking like they were trying to figure out any excuse to salvage their pride. John walked next to my passenger door, steady and ready. And then the moment hit. Clipboard guy, the same swaggering, buzz-cut little field commander who had been barking orders all afternoon, suddenly snapped and sprinted forward. "Hey, hey, stop! You can't go through!" Before I could put the truck in park, he charged straight at John and shoved both hands into his chest, hard, a mistake with a lifespan shorter than a firecracker. John's right hand hooked the man's wrist. His left slid under the elbow. Hips turned. Whump! Clipboard guy lifted clean off the ground and crashed onto the gravel so hard the dust rose like smoke. His clipboard skittered across the road with a metallic clatter. The rest of the patrol froze. One man gasped. Another fumbled his phone. A third whispered, "Oh, God." John didn't advance, didn't threaten, just stood ready, calm as morning fog. "Don't put your hands on people," he said softly. "Especially not the wrong one." Clipboard guy wheezed in the dirt. He attacked me. That's assault." John shook his head. "Buddy, you shoved me, and your cameras caught every second." The man filming lowered his phone immediately. I stepped beside John. "Battery on private land. Congratulations." "That's not a citation. That's jail time." Silence spread over them. Thick, ugly, panicked. And then we heard it. A faint siren, low, steady, getting closer. Every HOA man stiffened like a hunting dog hearing a branch snap. Clipboard guy's face drained of color. Karen said she'd handle the sheriff. John chuckled. "Looks like she ran out of magic tricks." Sheriff Bowman's cruiser rolled into view a moment later. No lights, no urgency. Just the steady confidence of a man who dealt with idiots for 3 decades and didn't expect today to be an exception. He stepped out and shut the door with a heavy thunk. His eyes scanned the scene. The cones, the fake vests, the grown man crying on the ground, the scattered clipboard, the dust still settling in the air. The sheriff exhaled once. Impersonating an officer, blocking a county road, and assault. He adjusted his belt, looked straight at clipboard guy, and added, "You boys really woke up this morning wanting to go to jail, didn't you?" No one answered. No one even breathed. The sheriff turned toward me and John, then back to the HOA crew, like a teacher realizing he'd walked into a classroom full of kids who'd set the curtains on fire. "Well," he muttered, "let's figure out which of you geniuses gets cuffs first." And as he walked forward, you could feel the whole ridge holding its breath. Sheriff Bowman stood there for a long moment, letting the weight of the situation settle like dust after a cattle drive. The HOA men stood stiff, eyes darting anywhere but at him. Clipboard guy, Randall, was still on the ground, one hand clutching his shoulder, the other lifting like he expected someone to help him up. Nobody did. Bowman finally turned toward me. "All right," he said. "Let's start sorting this mess." But before he could take another step, John spoke. "Sheriff, before you deal with them, there's something you need to see." Bowman paused, side-eyeing John the way old-school lawmen do when they sense a shift in the wind. "What is it, Sergeant?" John unlocked his phone, swiped once, then held it out. Bowman took the phone without another word. The quiet on that ridge went from tense to surgical. The first video showed up immediately. The HOA crew installing the fake utility box, the cheap plastic housing, the bogus cable, the phony county sticker, the fake grounding line they hammered into the dirt. And worst of all, the smug little coordination happening behind it. Bowman's eyes narrowed. John said calmly, "They were trying to create a false violation. Make it look like my friend tampered with county electrical equipment." Another swipe. The next clip came up. This time, the HOA crew stood around a teenage boy wearing a foam neck brace. A different man, clearly the self-appointed director, pointed a finger and barked, "No, no, fall slower this time. Make it look painful. We need it to look real." The kid nodded, lifted both arms stiffly like a bad actor, and then allowed himself to tip sideways into the grass as two adults pretended to gasp. Then another clip. The same kid, laughing between takes, eating a granola bar while a woman explained, "When we file the injury report, make sure you mention he took a blow to the head." Bowman didn't blink while watching any of it, but the stillness in his face changed. It hardened. When the last clip ended, he handed the phone back slowly, the way a surgeon might return a scalpel after realizing the patient was sicker than he thought. He exhaled once through his nose. Jesus H. Christ. The HOA men looked like they'd just seen a judge walk into a confessional booth. Bowman turned toward them, voice deepening. "You idiots weren't just harassing him." He jabbed a thumb toward the phone. "You were staging evidence, creating false reports, tampering with a utility structure, plotting to push a homeowner into criminal charges." His voice dropped lower. "That's fraud, that's conspiracy, and that's a felony." Kevin, the skinny one with the walkie-talkie, stammered, "Sheriff, we didn't mean..." Karen said it was just a safety demonstration. Bowman stepped toward him so fast the man stumbled backward. "Boy, if you say the word Karen like she's some kind of legal guardian angel one more time, I'll cuff you just for being stupid." Kevin's lips zipped shut like a frightened child. Randall, still sitting in the dirt, tried waving his uninjured arm. This is all a misunderstanding. I can explain." "No," Bowman said. "You can't. And you won't." He turned to his radio. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Bowman. I need 2 additional units, a scene tech, and the DA's duty investigator. We've got probable cause for coordinated fraud, utility tampering, and criminal staging of injury." The men turned pale in perfect unison. Bowman wasn't finished. "Also prepare a warrant request for the Lakeview Grace HOA office. We need their cameras, logs, internal communications, and any documentation tied to shoreline enforcement." The HOA crew stared at him, the way farmhands stare at a tornado heading for the barn. Kevin whispered, "A warrant?" Bowman looked at him like he was looking at a stain. "You think you can pull this level of stupidity in broad daylight and not have me call in the DA?" The wind shifted. The ridge fell quiet again. Then the sheriff crouched beside Randall, the exact same way he had minutes earlier, but now the tone was different, cold, final. "You boys thought this was some neighborhood game," he said, a little flexing, a scare tactic. He held up the phone. This is organized fraud. This is falsifying evidence. This is an attempt to weaponize the legal system against a private citizen." He stood back up. "And in my county, we don't play with that." Randall opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Bowman continued. "Randall, you're being arrested for battery, obstruction, and your role in the staged utility scam." The other HOA men twitched. Kevin squeaked, Are we also—" "Yes," Bowman replied before he could finish. "All of you. You're all being detained pending questioning, and if your names show up in that HOA evidence pile the DA's about to sift through, you'll be charged accordingly." One of the older men tried to step toward his SUV. Bowman snapped, "Move, and I swear I'll tack resisting and attempted escape on top." The man froze mid-step. I felt something release inside my chest, a slow unclenching I hadn't felt in months. John simply folded his arms. Bowman walked back toward us, lowering his voice. "You two did good recording all this," he said. "Hell, you saved me a month's worth of headaches. And when this hits the DA, that HOA is going to fall like a rotten fence post." I nodded. John didn't. He just stared forward like he'd already moved on to the next threat. Behind us, backup sirens began rising in the distance. Sharper this time, closer, decisive. The sound of justice, not chaos. Bowman adjusted his hat, turned back to the trembling HOA crew and said, "All right, boys, hands where I can see 'em. Line up, one at a time. You wanted to play authority? Today you get to see what the real thing looks like. And for the first time since this whole HOA war started, the ridge finally felt safe again. We heard her before we saw her. The engine, a high-pitched whine from one of those luxury golf carts the HOA insisted were eco-friendly transportation units. Tires skidding on gravel, a voice barking words none of us could quite make out yet, but the tone carried like a rusty saw. Sharp, shrill, desperate. Karen Duvall. Of course. She came flying around the bend so fast she nearly tipped the cart. Her sunglasses were oversized, thick white frames, designer nonsense that clashed with the fury written across her face. Her lips were pressed so tight they looked bloodless. She slammed the cart to a stop so abruptly that dust washed over her like a curtain. "What is going on here?" she demanded. Not asked, demanded, like this was still her ridge, her lake, her world. Sheriff Bowman didn't turn immediately. He finished cuffing Randall first, slow and deliberate. Then he straightened, adjusted his duty belt, and only then did he give her attention. "Afternoon, Ms. Duvall," he said, voice flat as stone. "You picked a hell of a time to show up." Karen's eyes darted from Randall in cuffs, to the other men lined up, to the evidence pouches on the hood of Bowman's cruiser, then finally to me and John, standing calmly like we were waiting for the cue to end. What did you do to them?" she snapped at me. I blinked. "Ma'am, I didn't do a thing." Her voice jumped nearly an octave higher. "They said you attacked them, that your friend assaulted one of our community officers." John let out a short, quiet exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. Bowman stepped forward. "Ma'am, these men aren't community officers. They aren't authorized by anybody. What they did today was illegal," Karen scoffed. "That's ridiculous. We were conducting a safety and compliance operation." The sheriff's jaw twitched. "On someone else's private property?" he asked. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Not because she realized she was wrong, but because she realized that answer mattered. She regrouped fast. People like her always do. She straightened her polo collar, lifted her chin. "Our HOA has authority to conduct wellness checks, access inspections, and necessary enforcement actions on adjacent properties." Bowman raised an eyebrow. "Adjacent properties owned by HOA members. He pointed at me, is not one." Karen fired back. "That entire shoreline is community relevance zone. It has shared recreational interest. The path his house blocks has been used for generations." "Nope." I said it calmly, but sharp. Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide with offended entitlement. I kept going. "There's a public access on the north side. You just don't want your residents walking an extra 15 minutes. "That's not the point." "Yes," John said from beside me, voice calm and deadly steady. "It actually is." Something in Karen's face twitched when she heard John's voice. Recognition. "You," she spat. "You're the one from earlier. You interfered with our inspection." John didn't blink. I walked by. "You threatened my officers." John shook his head once. "No. I told them to move their cars. You should be thanking me. They were about to get run over by a rancher coming home from town." The sheriff hid a smile behind a cough. Karen stomped forward until she was practically nose to badge with Bowman. "Sheriff, they have clearly assaulted my volunteers, and you need to arrest—" Bowman cut her off. "Ms. Duvall, your people installed a fake electrical box on his property. They staged an injury. They attempted to manufacture evidence for a false report." Karen's mouth fell open. That's absurd. Who told you that?" I lifted my phone. She went pale. Bowman added, "I've seen the videos." Karen's voice came out smaller. Those are out of context." John chuckled softly. "Lady, the only context was how to fake a neck injury." Bowman looked down at his notes. "Your people rehearsed it, directed it, pretended to fall, practiced lying, all recorded." Karen's lips trembled. They misunderstood my instructions. It was supposed to be a scenario drill." The sheriff stepped closer, voice lowering into that quiet, controlled register that scares grown men more than yelling ever could. "Ma'am, staging an injury for a false claim is fraud. Tampering with utility structures is criminal. What your board did wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a coordinated plan." Karen's eyes darted wildly, searching for something to throw back. And then she found her footing, not morally, but manipulatively. "You're only doing this because he," she jabbed a finger at me, "is manipulating you. He's dangerous, violent. He hit my son. The ridge went silent. John's head turned slightly. Bowman stared at her. I didn't move. Karen kept going, powered by sheer panic. My son came home bloody, injured, terrified, because that man attacked him on the beach like some animal. Bowman didn't blink. Your son shoved him first. Karen froze. The sheriff continued. It's on video. Both videos, actually. Your son's buddies filmed it for TikTok. Didn't work out too well for him. Karen went red, then white. She tried to recover. I don't care what your videos show. I'm the president of our association, and I demand you arrest. Bowman raised a hand. Ma'am, that single word made her stop mid-rant. You're not demanding a thing. You're about 2 steps away from being detained yourself. Karen's jaw dropped. On what grounds? Obstruction, conspiracy, attempted fraud, possibly directing a staged injury for purposes of filing a false report, and depending on what we find at your HOA office. He tapped his notebook. Maybe more. Karen's breath hitched. Then came the meltdown. You don't understand, she screamed. This community depends on me. I keep order. I maintain standards. People rely on my leadership. He's ruining everything. He's ruining the lake. The lake is fine, I said. Karen snapped toward me with a glare so sharp it could have cut steel. You are the problem. You think you can just sit on your porch and scare people away? Think you can hoard shoreline like some territorial dog? You don't belong here. John took 1 step forward, a small one, but enough to make 3 HOA men flinch, and Karen stumble back half a step. Bowman raised a hand again, but this time toward her. Ma'am, step away from them, now. Karen refused. No, I won't let him take our... Bowman reached for his handcuffs. The metallic click echoed loud enough to silence her mid-sentence. Ms. Duval, he said, voice low, turn around. Karen gasped. You can't arrest me. Bowman's expression didn't change. You're right, he said. I can't. She blinked, he added. But I can detain you pending investigation. And that broke her. She shrieked. She cried. She tried pleading, then threatening, then pleading again. The HOA men watched in stunned, awkward silence. John muttered to me, should have brought popcorn. I almost smiled. Bowman cuffed her gently but firmly, then began leading her toward the cruiser. Sheriff, Karen sobbed. This isn't how it's supposed to go. Bowman sighed. Ma'am, I'm starting to think nothing you planned ever goes the way you think it will. As he loaded her into the car, you could feel the entire ridge exhaling, like the sky itself had unclenched. The woman who'd tried to weaponize a whole community had finally been stopped. But as the cruiser door shut, I knew something else. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her downfall, and the beginning of our fight in court. Karen showed up to court the next morning, technically out on bail. Sheriff Bowman had arrested her the previous night, but rural counties move slow, and her criminal arraignment wouldn't be until later in the week. What we were walking into now wasn't the criminal trial. This was the emergency civil injunction hearing, where the judge would decide whether the HOA still had any power at all, and whether they could legally come anywhere near my property while the criminal charges were pending. It wasn't about jail time yet. This hearing was about stripping the HOA of authority. The courthouse felt colder than any morning on the ridge, not from the AC but from the tension floating in the air like fog. Even the fluorescent lights buzzed like they were bracing for something ugly. Karen entered in a stiff beige suit, hair wound so tight it looked like it hurt, jaw set like someone trying to hold reality together by force. 2 board members followed behind her, heads down, trying to look important but mostly looking terrified. My attorney, Meredith Claiborne, leaned over and whispered, "Remember, calm face. Let them dig their own grave." I nodded. Judge Hardwick took the bench. A silver-haired, stone-faced man who had probably settled more land disputes than all the lawyers in the room combined. He shuffled a few papers, unimpressed. "Let's proceed," he said. Karen leapt up like a jack-in-the-box. "Your Honor, before this begins, I request the immediate dismissal of all complaints on the grounds of harassment, targeted discrimination, and..." Hardwick didn't bother looking up. "Sit down, Ms. Duval." She sat. Meredith stood. "Your Honor, we call Deputy Kyle Rourke." The deputy described everything. The roadblock, the fake vests, the cones, the false claims of authority. He walked the court through how the men refused to move, ignored warnings, and tried to enforce HOA laws on a private landowner. The judge nodded once. Next, Meredith turned to me. Your Honor, we have video evidence. Proceed. I stood beside her as the first video appeared on the big courtroom monitor. 4 HOA volunteers in fake uniforms installing a bogus electrical box on my fence post. Their voices were crystal clear. Just bolt it on. He won't notice. If the sheriff asks, say it's been here forever. You could hear the jury suck in a breath. Karen's face tightened into a brittle mask. Hardwick wrote something down, pen scratching like a knife. Meredith played the second clip. The room fell into stunned silence. There they were, these grown men rehearsing a fake neck injury like they were putting on a middle school play. Clipboard guy coaching the injured volunteer. No, lean more forward. We need it to look real when he drives up. Brace tighter. You need to look hurt. Judge Hardwick slowly removed his glasses and then pinched the bridge of his nose. Karen popped up again, voice cracking. This is completely taken out of Sit down, Hardwick said without raising his voice. She sat. Then Meredith cued the final recording. The roadblock. My truck stuck. Their cones. Their lunging threats. John's countdown, steady and cold. The shove. The takedown. The screaming. The fake badges. Their demands for HOA compliance. It was all there. When the screen went black, the silence felt heavier than before. Judge Hardwick stared at Karen like he was looking at a puzzle made of stupidity and arrogance. Ms. Duval, he said, please tell me you didn't authorize this. Karen swallowed. I delegated enforcement to my committee. I didn't personally. Meredith stepped forward. Your Honor, we have emails from Ms. Duval instructing her board to, quote, pressure the owner until he cracks and create recordable violations even if we have to establish them ourselves. Karen's eyes widened, like she'd been hit with a hammer. The judge blinked. Those words came from you? She trembled. They were taken out of context. I meant, Hardwick slammed his hand on the desk. No, they mean exactly what they say. Her attorneys shrank like scolded children. The judge exhaled long and slow. Your client is in very serious trouble. Over the next 30 minutes, whatever scraps of legitimacy the HOA clung to evaporated. They had no authority over my land, no right to conduct inspections, no right to approach my driveway, no right to place anything on my property, and positively no right to stage evidence. The judge's expression went from annoyed to offended to fully disgusted. Finally, he delivered the ruling. Effective immediately, Karen Duval is removed as president of the Lakeshore Homeowners Association. Karen gasped, a tiny broken sound. The HOA is prohibited from contacting the plaintiff in any form, from entering his property, or from establishing enforcement activities within 500 feet of his residence. One of her board members actually whimpered. And due to the gravity of this evidence, the court is issuing a criminal referral to the county attorney's office for possible charges, including impersonation, conspiracy, fraud, and assault. Karen went pale as plaster, but the judge wasn't done. This HOA will be placed under provisional state oversight. A full financial audit will begin within 72 hours. Then the gavel hit wood, a crack so sharp it seemed to split the air. Karen slumped in her chair, staring at nothing. The board members quietly stepped away from her, like she was radioactive. John clapped me on the back. Well, he murmured, that's one way to ruin her week. I didn't smile, I just breathed. For the first time in days, I breathed freely. But deep inside, I knew the truth. The civil side was over. The criminal storm hadn't even begun. And when it hit, the HOA wouldn't survive it. By Thursday morning, the county courthouse looked like a stirred-up hornet nest. Reporters stood outside, microphones pointed at the front steps. Deputies kept weaving through the crowd carrying folders stamped with thick red labels. Criminal referral. Priority. Karen Duval was no longer just a name on paperwork. She was now case number 24-319B in the state of Georgia. When the criminal charges were formally filed, the list was long enough to look like a grocery receipt. Impersonation of a public official, conspiracy to defraud, tampering with utility infrastructure, filing false reports, coordinated harassment, accessory to assault. attempted coercion of a private landowner, and one more charge added by the county attorney himself after watching the staged injury video 3 times. Manufacturing fraudulent evidence, I'd never seen a judge raise his eyebrows that high. It was almost funny, if it weren't so pathetic. That afternoon, the sheriff's office released the official mugshots. There was Karen, still trying to hold her chin up like she was posing for a driver's license renewal. Her hair was flattened on one side from the holding bench. The camera caught that twitch under her left eye, the one she always got when she lost control of a room. The board members didn't fare much better. Clipboard guy looked like he'd just been told Santa wasn't real. The fake electric box installer had the expression of a man reconsidering every decision he'd made since high school. And the staged injury volunteer, still wearing the damn neck brace. I don't think he knew whether to commit to the bit or abandon it. Sheriff Bowman told the press, "This wasn't a property dispute. This was an organized effort to intimidate a private citizen using fraudulent authority, and Georgia law has very little patience for that." He didn't mention my name, but everyone already knew. By sunset, the HOA group chat leaked online, screenshots of board members panicking, begging each other to delete old messages, asking whether they could distance themselves from Karen or claim she acted independently without authorization. Too late. The state auditor's office arrived the next day. 3 unmarked Crown Vics, 4 investigators in gray jackets, clipboards, laptops, evidence bags. They swept through the HOA clubhouse like a tornado in a trailer park. 2 hours later, they walked out with 7 boxes of financial documents, 2 desktop towers, a suspicious thumb drive, and something wrapped in evidence tape labeled Private Donations Ledger. From the look on their faces, whatever was inside had enough heat to melt steel. That night, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Only 10 homeowners showed up. Half of them left before it was over. The minutes leaked within hours. One sentence stood out: motion to dissolve Lakeshore HOA due to legal liability and inability to continue operations. Passed 9-1. Karen was the one vote against it, from her jail cell. By the weekend, the neighborhood signage was gone. The guard shack closed. The HOA website went offline. Their last official statement, posted shakily on Facebook, read like a funeral notice. Effective immediately, the Lakeshore Homeowners Association has ceased all operations pending state review. People in town started calling it the HOA that self-destructed. Then came the phone calls. One homeowner asked if he owed dues anymore. Another wanted to apologize for not knowing Karen was that crazy. A third asked if I would consider consulting on dealing with difficult boards. I declined. I wasn't in the business of cleaning up HOA messes. I just wanted my quiet lake. On Sunday morning, John and I sat on the porch again, coffee mugs warm in our hands. The lake was calm, the fog thin and white on the surface. John nudged me. "You hear they're auctioning off the HOA furniture next week? Could buy Karen's old desk." I smirked. What the hell would I do with it? He shrugged. "Firewood." We laughed. Then the wind shifted, carrying that familiar silence I'd bought the land for. No engines, no fake uniforms, no board meetings plotting around me, just water, pines, and peace, the real kind. The war was over, and the HOA, gone, like they'd never been there at all. A full year has a way of sanding down the sharp edges of a hard memory. The lake looks the same as it always did, blue, steady, patient, but my life feels different now. Not louder, not busier, just lighter. Like someone lifted a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying across my shoulders. The HOA, gone. The clubhouse sold. The old guard shack now sits empty, vines crawling up the siding. Folks drive past it like it's an abandoned gas station on a forgotten highway. Nobody talks about Karen anymore except in hushed tones, usually followed by a slow head shake. The homeowners who stayed have been kind. A few stop by when they're out walking, usually to drop off something small, fresh honey, homemade jam, stories about grandkids or fishing luck. No forms, no notices, no fines, just neighbors again. John still visits every couple of months. He always brings something he calls marine essentials, which somehow means beer, jerky, and the occasional rusty old sign he thinks I'll appreciate. The last one read, "Private land, peace enforced daily." I hung it on the boathouse door. Business at Lynch Lakecraft picked up more than I expected. Folks heard about the whole mess, and somehow that turned into trust. If you fought an HOA, one man told me, you can damn sure fix a boat. I didn't argue. Tonight, I walked out to the dock, same as I did that first week I bought the land. The boards creaked under my boots, warm from the day's sun. The moon stretched across the water like silver spilled from a mason jar. I sat down at the edge, feet dangling over the calm surface, and let the silence wrap around me, clean, real, earned. No patrols, no threats, no HOA, just the lake, just home.